Hello and welcome, I'm Sammy K. Powers, and in this video series we are going to be writing tests for PHP source. This isn't going to be writing tests for PHP unit or anything like that, but we're going to be writing actual tests to test the PHP source code. So this video series is broken up into a number of videos, probably about 5 videos at the end of the day, and maybe a couple bonus videos at the end, but we'll see. But the very first step that we need to do is compile PHP from source, which is the very first thing we're going to do. So here I am in the terminal. I've got a Docker container actually running Ubuntu on my Mac. I've actually done this process on my MacBook Pro, and I know people have done this on Windows. It's a little harder to do this on Windows, so if you're using Windows, it's going to be a little tougher, and I don't have specific instructions for you, so I'm sorry about that. But if you are using Ubuntu, this is going to be the easiest way to do it. Mac's a little bit more tricky to get running, but let's try with Ubuntu. This is a very bare instance. In fact, if I try to look at what version of Git I have, I don't even have Git installed. Like, it's super bare. So we're going to assume that you don't have all the things that you need to get PHP compiled from source either. So we're going to do this all together. So first thing I want to do, sudo apt get update. And this is basically going to allow me to update all the repos for apt-get so that I can have all the latest versions of everything. All right, so now that that's done, why don't we just go ahead and install Git, because we're actually going to use Git to clone the PHP source code to our computer. And it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to install? So I'm going to add this -y to say, yes, I'm sure I want to install it, so it doesn't have to ask me. All right, so now that that's done, that probably went a lot faster in the video than it did for you, but that's because I just fast forwarded through that. In fact, that's going to happen a lot. I'm going to fast forward through the long bits so you don't have to sit here and wait. So the magic of editing will make things go faster. So now we need a place to put the source code. So I'm just going to arbitrarily put it in the usr/src directory. And if I try to list the files that are in there, it's completely empty. So I'm just going to put the files there. You can put them wherever you want. And now we're going to clone it. In order to clone this, we need to pop on over to GitHub, where the PHP source code lives. And if you go to github.com/php/php-source, you'll see it's got this lovely repo here full of C code. If you don't know, PHP is actually written in C, as you can see here. But the tests are written in PHP, which is really exciting because, hey, we're PHP programmers. So we're going to write some tests in PHP for PHP. So there's a little button here, clone or download. If you're already a member of Git and have your SSH keys and everything set up, you can just copy this URL right here. Otherwise, you can click over here and grab the HTTPS version, whichever one, it doesn't matter, whichever one you've got configured. So we're going to copy one of those, and we're going to pop back into our terminal. Let's just make sure we have Git installed. We didn't check that. Oh, we do. Perfect. Great. So our apt-get installed it perfectly. So let's do git clone, and then all we're going to do is paste in that thing we copied from GitHub. And as you can see here, we're getting an error message about all this public key stuff and whatever. That's because we copied the wrong URL here. This is a container that's totally bare, doesn't have any of my SSH keys set up or anything. So I need to pop back over here and use the SSH version, the HTTPS version, and do the same exact thing, git clone, and we're just paste in that URL, press enter, and it should start cloning for me. Now, this is going to take a really long time because the PHP source code repo is huge. In fact, we're going to fast forward through this just so you don't have to sit here and wait forever, but it's going to take a really, really long time. And there we go. So now if we do a ls to see what we have here, we have a new directory called php-source, and that's the name of the repo. So we'll just go ahead and cd into php-source. And do another ls, and we can see we have a bunch of files in here. So since PHP is written in C, if you're used to compiling things from C, you might be familiar with the old configure, make, sudo make, install. So what this does is it runs configure to set everything up, check some libraries, see what you got. Then we try to compile everything with make, and then we actually move the compiled binaries to somewhere on your computer, wherever you specified, usually from your configure prefix flag when you run make install. So if you're familiar with compiling things from C, that's probably pretty familiar to you. But if you've never done that before, that's okay. Let's just try this first. So since it's a standard C program, let's just run configure, and we realize that there is no configure. PHP source does not come with configure. In fact, we have to do this thing called buildcomp. So there's a buildcomp in here. If we run this, we get an error because make is not found. Now remember, in this example, I'm running a super bare container here. Like I didn't even have git installed. You might be able to run buildcomp no problem. So go ahead and give it a try. If it gives you some sort of error like you can't find this, can't find that, make is one of those core essential things that you need, and there's no compiler on here, there's no GCC, there's no nothing. So in order to build all that in once, there's this handy command here. We're going to use our old apt-get and install something called build-essential. And I'm going to do the -y to say, yes, I want you to install it. Basically, what this is going to do is install all the good things that we want, like compilers and make and all that kind of good stuff. We'll hopefully install everything that we need in order to compile PHP from source. And there we go. Now we should have make, and we do. We should have GCC and a couple of other things. I don't know. Can you do this version? Yeah, so we have make, we have GCC, we have a bunch of different things that we will need in order to run, or in order to compile PHP from source. So let's go ahead and try to build our config file again, buildcomp, run it. What's happening? We get another error. It's saying that autoconf is not found. Oh my goodness. Oh, so many dependencies. Well, luckily for us, most of this stuff can be installed pretty easily with apt-get. So let's go ahead and try to do apt-get install autoconf and just tell it yes, we want to install it. And finally, let's try this one more time. Let's try to run buildcomp and see if we can get it working without some warnings. Oh, modification time. Clock skew detected. Oh my goodness, so many things. Don't have to worry about those, but I think from now on we should be able to run configure. And we can. Great. Okay, I'm going to cancel out of that for just a second and clear the screen. So typically when you run configure, you got to send in a bunch of options. And if we run configure with --help, configure --help, you can see we have a ton of options here. We can enable all kinds of things, disable things, enable these extensions, and all kinds of things. Tons and tons of things. But for what we're wanting to do, just to run some basic tests, we're going to try to get a pretty bare minimum installation of PHP. Now, PHP's standard library is huge. So even if you try to go with the most minimal standard lib that you can possibly think of, it's still going to include a ton of things. So let's just see what the essentials are that we really need. So let's do configure, and we're going to do this first one, enable maintainer ZTS. So this is thread safety. This is enabling thread safety for maintainers. So we are official maintainers because we're writing code for PHP source. I'm going to add this backslash here so I can give myself a new line. You don't have to add this backslash. You can just keep going with a space and then another dash. So dash enable debug. Now this is going to give us access to a couple different things like debug messages that you wouldn't normally see. I think there's some memory profiling that goes on. So you wouldn't want to actually run this typically in a production environment. You wouldn't want to enable debug because it hurts performance, but it's actually really handy when we're doing some hardcore debugging and hacking on things. I'm going to do another backslash to give me one more line here because we want to enable the CLI SAPI. Now, PHP comes with a number of SAPIs. There used to be a ton of SAPIs actually in PHP 5x. In PHP 7, it got whittled down to just a couple. But one of those SAPIs is the CLI. It's the command line SAPI that we want to actually use to run PHP straight from the command line. So that's the only one we really care about. So we're going to go ahead and run configure with those options enabled and see what we get here. Oh my goodness, it says, warning, you need RE2C. And it also says we need bison. So what are these things? RE2C is the lexer that PHP uses. It's the lexer generator, I should say, to be more specific. And bison is the parser generator that PHP uses. So if you want more information, you can Google about those two things. We don't have enough time to get into them right now, but we can install them. Sudo apt-get install. And we're just going to install both of these in one go. REC2 and bison. And we're going to say yes, install it, please. And I misspelled REC2. Oh. RE2C. There should be an app I can install for my dyslexia. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and try to run that again. So I'm just going to press up a couple times on my keyboard to see the previous commands. And here's the one that we tried to run with configure. So configure enable maintainer thread safety, enable debug, and enable the CLI SAPI. We press enter. I'm going to predict that we're going to have one more dependency that we're missing, having something to do with XML. And as I predicted, we ran into an error. Because we're missing a dependency, we need this XML2-config, whatever the crap that means. Well, like I said, PHP's standard library is huge. It includes a number of XML modules or extensions, so we need to actually install this. Now, I could have just had you install all these at the beginning and not have to go through all this nonsense, but I wanted to get through the process of hitting these dependencies that it can't find, and allowing you to see that if you do run into these, there's probably other dependencies that you might see that we don't even go over, but you can go onto Google and figure out which dependencies you need to install and then just install them. But typically when you install these, you need the dev version because we're compiling from source. So in this case, we also need the dev version. So apt-get install, and then we're going to do libxml2, and we're going to do -dev to give us the development version. And we're going to say, yes, we want it. It's going to do all this fun stuff to install it. All right, now once it's installed, we can just use our up key a couple times to see where our last command was for the configure. There it is. We press enter and crossing our fingers and hoping that it actually works this time. And there we go. We're done configuring. So now that we have this configured, we should be able to run make. If I just type make, it should start compiling all of the source code into binary format. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that for a second because I want to show you something kind of cool. Make takes a while to compile. PHP doesn't take too terribly long to compile. HHVM takes forever to compile. But I want to give you a little trick here. If you do inproc, like that, you'll see a number. Now, this works on Ubuntu. On Mac, it's like a different command to get it. But what you're looking for is a command that will show you the number of cores that you have on your computer. I actually have 8 cores, but in this container, I only have access to 4 for some reason. Now, if you have, say, 4 cores running, you can do a special thing with make. You can give it a -j command, which means jobs, and then no spaces, and immediately give your number of cores +1, so in this case 5. So what this is going to do is going to take as many jobs as possible and run them concurrently, or I should say in parallel, so that they're running at the same time, so it can compile much faster. When I press enter, running it with a -j with the number of cores +1 should take a lot less time than if you just run make without the -j. And now we're done making it. Now we should have a compiled binary of PHP living somewhere in our folder. So we told it to install the CLI SAPI, so we can access that from sapi/cli/php. If we do --version, fingers crossed, we should see something like this. This is a compiled binary of the master branch of PHP source, which at the time of recording is set to 7.2, which hasn't come out yet, but it's about to come out actually pretty soon. So chances are when you compile it, it's going to say something like 7.3, 7.4, or maybe even 8. Some people were saying that they want it to go to 8 after 7.2. I don't think that's going to happen. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll probably see at least one more minor version before going for a major one. But there we have it. Let's take a look at the extensions that we have installed. So sapi/cli/php. And if we use the -m flag, we can see, just have to scroll up just a little bit here, to see all the extensions that are installed by default, basically. All we told it was to install the CLI SAPI, which gets installed by default, I believe, anyway. But as you can see, there's a lot more stuff going on here. In fact, you can see here at the bottom, we've got these XML ones, and that's the reason why we would install the XML dependencies. So lots of good stuff. Enough stuff that we can start testing with. Now I'm going to list the files here and give you a little sneak preview of what we're going to be talking about later on in the next video. That is the runtest.php. This is PHP's black box testing tool that is used to test all the functionality of PHP with essentially system tests. We're going to get into that in the next video, but that about does it for compiling PHP from source. So in summary, we cloned the PHP source code to our computer. We had to install a bunch of dependencies like git and build essential and all that kind of stuff. And we ran the config file with specific flags like enabling thread safety and debug and enabling the CLI SAPI. And we compiled the PHP binary with make. And in the next video, we are going to be jumping into running run tests, running the test suite with run tests.